Good morning, I'm Howard Hale. Thanks for joining me for today's edition of the Horseman's Corner. With me on the program today, Jonathon Field. He's a Canadian horseman that will be at the Rocky Mountain Horse Expo, March 11th through the 13th. He's from Vancouver, British Columbia. But Jonathon, you're not in Vancouver right now. Where are you, and what are you doing there?
Well, I just arrived in Los Angeles last night and went over to Pomona. I'm coming to the Equine Affair right now. So it's a little warmer here and beautiful palm trees and a little different from home.
Is it been kind of a nasty winter up in Vancouver?
Yeah, we've had just socked in with rain lately and really cold wind. But it's not it's not too bad compared to what I hear you guys are dealing with right now. So,
hey, give me a little bit of your background, will you? How did you get involved with the horses, and when did you start?
Well, I was lucky enough. I had both my parents were involved in horses. They're from Manitoba and Saskatchewan in the prairies there, and they actually rode horses to school. And when they moved out to BC out west, my dad, he went as a working cowboy, and Mom worked on the ranches with him and so on. And then my mom actually became passionate about dressage. So I was really brought into it early and had some very unique conversations around the dinner table at night with my mom being a dressage rider and my dad being a cowboy. So then from there, I went through 4-H and did all the the games and things like this, and went decided that I really wanted to go be a working cowboy. I was 14 years old, and my dad would bring me back to these ranches, and I just fell in love with that whole thing and started working at a ranch called the Kulshana Ranch. It's a ranch in Merritt, BC, in the beautiful Nicola Valley. It's a big old historic ranch. I worked with those guys and lived up there in the cow camp and actually left school early to do correspondence school or homeschooling so I could wouldn't miss the spring turnout and the fall gather, all the key times at the ranch. And then I went and I met some great horsemen. I met Pat Pirelli and studied his methods and several others along the way and just became really passionate about trying to figure out how I could do things with a horse better than what I'd done before, and still trying to do that today.
Well, it's a never-ending process, isn't it?
That's for sure, yeah. I think that's the fun part. I had a really great experience I guess it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, but I got the chance to go down to Florida and ride with George Morris, and my background, because of my mom, had a lot of strong English influence, and I rode English for years and did some showing there, and riding with George and seeing him at the time of his life and how passionate he is still, it really just, you look to the future of our lives with these horses and think, man, it is really a never-ending journey.
Now, that's interesting, where your mom was involved with the dressage and your dad a cowboy, but when it comes right down to it, horsemanship's horsemanship, I would think.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day what outfit you put on, and that's the key. The thing both my mom and dad both had was just a true love for the horses. They were raised on their backs, and that's what I got out of it. Both my sister and I, and we just try to go out every day there and have fun with them and understand more. And I still ride jumping horses and every chance I get, and I really just love to try to figure out how can we get things softer, get things at a higher level of performance, but without causing the fear or causing the kind of resentment in a horse against what the person's asking of them. So it's continually asking, well, how do I present this a little better? How do I offer this a little better to the horse?
Now, did your mom being a dressage rider, did that help you with some of your Western riding, some of the ideas you picked up from her?
Yeah, it sure did. And I had some great coaches that really helped me about riding position and all, the biomechanics of a horse and how things really work from a balance point of view, and how rhythm and relaxation work together. And as a working cowboy out there, a lot of that at the time, I didn't really realize the benefit of that. But at the time when you're galloping across some slippery side hill and there's ice there and you're after some old cow or doing whatever you're doing, that all that balance and how you stay out of the horse's way plays such an important part for them not to fall down or you not to get hurt or to be able to get in there and do what you need to do. And it's tested ultimately in those experiences when you're pushing the limits on a working ranch like that. It was just the greatest thing to always put to purpose what we had learned in the arena.
Who are some of the people besides your folks and to some extent Pat Pirelli that were influential on your horsemanship?
Well, so many of the influences that I had over the years, you wouldn't recognize the names of them. They were, mentors of mine as a young man at the ranch, cowboys that I worked with, guys that have been doing it their whole life. Another man that you might be aware of is a guy named Ronnie Willis. He's passed away now, but he's just an amazing horseman and just a first-class human being. And I had the chance to ride with him and meet him actually in Colorado there, down in Pagosa Springs at Pat's place. We met him one time, and then from there we kept in touch and rode together more. And Ronnie, he was close friends with Tom Dorrance and Ray Hunt and those guys. And Ronnie just had such a great way about him, about how you develop a horse to want to be with a person, how you get that feel to have between a horse and a person. And he would always bring up, that idea of the mare and the foal, and how that's such a kind of a model or a perfect relationship, and how you see that foal coming beside that mare, and they've got this balance of, this respect and this love, and, to try to achieve more with the horse all the time, but still have the horse want to try to be there and want to be engaged in it and have a feel or connection to the person. Ronnie was such a massive influence on me for that. And I just smile every time I think of the guy, Each time there's so many people that help you along the way, that every time you do that little thing with a horse, whether it's driving or jumping with, a little lesson George might have said, or, one of these guys, you go along and you get that little piece, that little, and it reminds you of that person. And it's kind of neat thinking back on all this.
Talk a little bit more about that relationship with the mare and the foal, will you?
Yeah. The thing that, and Ronnie he always brings that up, is when you look at how they get into sync with each other, when you look at that connection that they have, the bond that they have, when I see that foal exuberantly run to the mare, I see that connection that they have, yet they still have respect, yet that, sometimes the foal tries to push in, and, some mares are a little more lenient than others, but I suppose that's like, parents and kids too, but, that relationship that they share, one of the things I do a lot with horses, and I do it for fun, and I do it to challenge myself, is to play with horses at liberty and try to get them to come to me, hang out with me, be with me with no ropes, no leads, and even riding bridleless and these kinds of things, all to try to get to that relationship. Because when I am on a working cattle ranch or, doing something like jumping and I have the saddle and I have the bridle and I have all those tools, the lessons that I learned by creating the desire in a horse to want to come to me at liberty, want to be able to be with me, want to hang out with me, run when I run, go when I go, stop when I stop. Those lessons that you learn apply so much to when you do have the full bridle on the saddle and everything else. They're little subtleties, and, Ronnie would always talk about that. You watch the mare in a foal, just in a pasture. For that matter, watching a herd of horses, you see these subtleties, how they communicate, how they flick an ear, how they might, move their ear before their head, how they might move their head just before their neck, and how, you just start to see these little things, and when we can start to recognize those little changes in a horse, like the flick of an ear or the softening of an eye or the softening of their chin or their letting go in their jaw or maybe up by their neck, and how that, sometimes you see a big ridgeline muscle coming right behind behind the ear there. When that softens, or, maybe they're tight underneath by the flank, wherever that tension is underneath the tail, if we can find where that is and get rid of that brings us closer to that relationship like horses have with each other. And when you have that, to me, that's what I'm working towards all the time. And when I can have that, then when I want to go jump, then when I want to go, working on the ranch, and you get in some of those sticky situations when it's not with some old cow, you've got that relationship. You've got that horse saying, "Hey, I actually want to be there. I'm here for you, buddy." And there's been so many occasions where that's been the case with my horses, where they've stuck in there when they probably wouldn't have otherwise, years gone by for sure.
Jonathan, time for us to take a break, but you folks stay with us. We'll have more in a moment. You're listening to the Horseman's Corner. Welcome back to the Horseman's Corner. I'm Howard Hale, host of the show. We're on part 2 of today's program, and let's continue with horseman and clinician Jonathon Field, who will be at the Rocky Mountain Horse Expo March 11th through the 13th. Kind of interesting where you mentioned the mare and the foal, because we had an orphan foal this year, and we had an open mare that Guy adopted him as soon as we put him in with her, and he didn't get spoiled. He learned from the mare.
Wow, boy, that's remarkable. She adopted him so readily. That's terrific.
Yeah, it took her about 2 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah. We turned the we now she didn't. She was open. We had to feed the colt on a bottle, and we wanted to. We thought, oh man, if we just feed him on the bottle, he's going to be a mess. So we better try to find a mare that'll bond with him, and she sure did. And we turned him out in the arena where we had some other horses tied up, and had the mare with him. And it did take about 2 seconds. First thing she did was got between him and the horses that were tied to the wall, and that was it. They were together from then on.
Well, you don't hear it work out like that often.
No, you don't, and it was kind of a neat deal. And we've now got the colt in with the other horses, the other colts that we wean. He gets along with them fine, and he's not a pain when we go in there.
Oh, so boy, that's terrific.
Yeah, it was a neat deal. Hey, when people come to see you at a show like the Equine Affair or the Rocky Mountain Horse Expo, what are they going to see?
Well, in the case of the Rocky Mountain Horse Expo here and the Equine Affair, this time I'm going to go out, and I've got a group of people that are, and I think there's still room available for people to come if they want to bring their horse. And we've got a whole bunch of clinics lined up at the Rocky Mountain Horse Expo where we're going to bring people through. So I'm going to spend an hour and a half with them a couple times a day. I'm going to actually do a 6-hour clinic the day before the expo with a small group. We're just going to spend all day together talking horsemanship and helping those people where they're at with their horse. Of course, they come and they bring all the unique experiences or challenges that they might be faced with. So, I kind of figure out where we're going to go and help them out from there. Other times when I bring my horses, and most of the time I do, it's very rare that I ever go without them. In this case, it just happens to be 2 that I am. But I like to bring my horses most of the time. The reason is because I want to help teach people with their horse like we're going to do at these expos, but I also want to show where it goes. I also want to show a bit of the potential of it. And if they focus and learn some of this knowledge about the horse, they can do it. And the big thing for me is to really emphasize that, wherever we're at, it doesn't matter whether, it's George Morris talking about his life with horses and how he's still learning and picking up things all the time, or whether we're just getting started, is there's always, more to understand, more to learn. And, I like to bring my horses because lots of times it helps inspire people to go out there and seek for more. In this day and age with this, the information, revolution here about, how we can now see it on a BlackBerry phone, to get a lesson or with all the expos that happen. It's such a great time for us to be able to, take that extra bit of knowledge and extra bit of time that we have and be able to apply it to a horse. I think it's a real luxury in this moment in history to be able to hang out with horses and do it for just the sake of what can I do to be better. I hope that we get to keep that for a long time.
What age do you like to start your horses?
Well, as soon as I can, I like to be around them, the moment they're born. If I can be there, I don't want to be a huge part of that in terms of I just want to be there and have them understand that, I'm one of the friends. And then just slowly over time, we start asking more of them as they go through weanling and yearling and, developing that relationship just on the ground. And then as far as starting horses under saddle goes, it depends on the horse. I just started. We have a young 3-year-old. We have a 3-year-old that I just got started, and I put 10 hours of riding on him over the course of about 2.5 weeks. And then we're just going to turn him back out to the ranch. My wife has a Hanoverian. He was so gangly and so kind of didn't look very together. I didn't want to get on him. Those warm bloods take so long to mature. So we waited till he was 5 now. His name is Maxfield. And I just got him started this winter, too, put another 10 good rides on him, and he's going back to the ranch for 3 months to hang out, too. So even at 5, I still felt that he was, you can just tell when those horses are hardened up or when they're, it feels like you can anyways. I'm not sure that you can. You probably need x-rays, but, he just didn't feel tight yet. So I thought, let's just get him riding over the course of a couple of weeks and then turn him back out. I really want to have those horses, sound for a long, long time. So with our 3-year-old that I just started, little quarter horse, I just started him and got him going and let him go. And I'll pick up on him and take him for a few nice big long circles up there around those cows and give him some purpose and then turn him out for a little while longer and get back on with them.
And that makes a lot of sense because it can be pretty tough on a lot of these colts when they have to do too much in their 2 or 3 year old year, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. It can be tough, and it's for me. I don't have to be at a futurity, and I don't have to kind of do that with the horse. So what I'm looking for is, can I just give him a little bit of a ride and then turn him out for a while and get him back again? And he'll kind of like this. For example, my goal with this young Stitch horse, his name is Stitch. He's a 3-year-old. If he really kind of comes together at 5 years, 6 years old, where he's now into the daily routine. And traveling down the road in the horse trailer and on the ranch working and these kinds of things, I'll have a horse that he'll still be trucking down the road and doing things and roping little cows when he's 13, 14, and 15. So that's the goal with him.
And very well could be when he's 17, 18, 19, and 20 as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just lucky enough I don't have to have that rush. It's and some of the time things that you have to kind of get there quick, it's a challenge because you're put underneath that time constriction, and some of the horses go through it and come out just fine, and others are more challenged physically, just with growth plates and so on. So for me, I'm just lucky that I don't have to have that, and I'm not into that, so I can let Stitch have a whole bunch of time.
How about the Hanoverian? You didn't start him till he was 5, but gosh, what's your wife going to do with him? Make a dressage horse out of him?
Yeah, we likely will. That's his whole background. That's where his lineage comes from. He's a beautiful mover. He's still not finished growing. He probably won't finish growing till he's near 7, at least 6. He's even in the last 6 months, we've noticed such a change in him. And she'll likely make a dressage horse out of him. And the biggest thing he'll do is he'll ride around the ranch, and eventually he'll pack our kids around, and she won't be too focused on any particular one thing, and I might even take him go, do a little roping off him or something, and he's a nice solid horse.
Yeah, and you have some this horse on YouTube, don't you?
Yeah, Maxfield is on YouTube. Yeah, because I just started him and I put it on there, and I did the very first my first ride bareback with him, and put that on. Then about 5 days later, I put my 6th ride on him. So you get to see the 6th ride that we did and where he was at. And then he's actually, my wife actually took him for a ride. She was really asking me, what's he like? How does he move? And all of these things. And so I told Angie, I said, well, okay, he's good enough. I took him for a nice ride, and I said, just get up there. I can't let a mother of 2 get hurt here because, I can't be looking after those kids full time. There's no way I could do what she could do. So I made sure that he was very ready for her, and she got up and had a nice ride on him. And we actually videoed that too. We haven't put it on YouTube, but my wife's pretty shy. I don't know if she'll let me do that, but she took a ride on it too. She was really keen to see what he moved like.
And that's interesting because I took a look at went to your website. Hey, tell people how they can get to your website, will you?
Yeah, you bet. They can go to www.jonathanfield.net.
Yeah, and then from there they can go on to YouTube and see what you're doing with some of these horses.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just released a new clip of my stallion. He's an Andalusian. He's an 8-year-old. He's a Spanish stallion. He was shipped over from Spain as a 4-year-old, and we just released a new clip on him. And he's just such a stunning horse. And an Andalusian has been my real dream horse for so many years. Their movement and their power and all those things, and calmness of mind under pressure. They've been bred for bullfighting, and they've got that bullfighting and dressage and various things, but they've got that amazing athletic lateral movement in them that this horse can pretty much be going cantering along straight and turn sideways and continue going at the same speed, and he's just a remarkable mover. So I just did that one. Take a look at that one, Howard. It's kind of a fun one.
Oh yeah, I will. That'll be fun to take a look at. So you've been attracted to these Andalusians. What size horse is the Andalusian?
Well, he's 15.2, 15.3, right in that range. And they have to be a PRE standard or a registered in Spain. They have to meet a certain criteria of several measurements. And if they meet that, then they become what they call PRE. And that means, and I don't even want to try to interpret it, Pura Raza Español is it? But somebody who actually knows how to pronounce it properly will say it much more accurately.
What are you going to use him for on the ranch?
Well, I've already started working some cattle off him, moving them around, and I wanted to. I do these shows at Liberty where I come out in the evening with my horses, and sometimes it's many horses, or sometimes it's just one, and sometimes bridleless shows or Liberty shows. And I really see his name is Cameroon, and I really see him doing that. And I've already started some live shows with him. Just to get him out there. And he was quite nervous to the public, and he had a whole different program about training when I got him. It was much more pressure oriented, much more force. When they handed them to me, with a serreta, which is a steel bar that pinches and has these teeth through it that goes over his nose and actually indented his cartilage through the front of his nose just from the pressure, continually kind of digging in on his nose. So there was a lot of pressure and a lot of fear that he had around that. And as a result of the fear, he became quite aggressive. So it's really been the last 2 years that I've had him to just, get rid of all that and get him okay with me around his head and around his nose. I never used a thread. I put a rope halter on him and got him to soften and lighten to that. And then it kind of bringing him out into a crowd for some reason, because I don't quite know his whole past, brought a lot of those kind of energies back. So what I did instead of a show with him, the kind of a live show, was I just brought him out and hung out and taught clinics off him. So there was a bunch of people there. There was clapping and there was movement of the audience. And then this year, this last October, I had him out, and he just took this big sigh out there. I just felt him underneath me. He just kind of, okay, it's the same as at home, And I kind of said, this is terrific now. Now he's starting to, he doesn't care if there's an audience there. He's trusting me. And so I'll probably do some demonstrations on him, Howard. I'll do some shows and kind of see where he goes and see what I can get done with him.
So how old was he when you got him?
He's 6. So he was in Canada for 2 years. He was shipped over as a 4-year-old from Spain, and had a ton of moves, a lot of things that were, he had a lot of kind of tricks, so to speak, that he could do by then. And the challenge with that was that he had so many moves that he had been taught to, Spanish walk or piaffe or passage or lay down or sit or all these different things that he would do. He would just kind of go through his routine, go through his tricks every time you asked something of him. And I had to stop him from doing that to try to, over the last 2 years, to just try to get him to look at me and connect to me and figure out what I'm doing and not go through this routine. And we're just getting there now where it feels, you can see on that video that, him and I are we're out in a 10-acre pasture at one point, and there's not a rope on him, and there's, horses on the other side of the fence, and he stays with me at Liberty with no ropes and running around and just kind of playing. And that, I think of Ronnie a lot when I think of that, because it goes back to that mare and that foal and how do you develop that connection, or two buddies, two buddies playing out in the pasture. And we start to get that feeling now and again. It's really exciting for me. He gives me a total rush 1 minute, and because of the power and the excitement in this horse, and then the next minute, he's as soft as a kitten and he's curling around me, and it's a real dynamic though. And playing with this stallion has sure been a learning curve for sure.
Jonathan, we have to take a break and get this program paid for, but you folks stay tuned. We'll have more in a moment. You're listening to the Horseman's Corner. Welcome back to the Horseman's Corner. We're on part 3 of today's program. I'm Howard Hale, host of the show, and let's continue with Jonathon Field of Vancouver, BC, clinician and horseman. Let's talk a little more about the Andalusian stallion that you're working with. Does he ever have any flashbacks, Jonathan?
Well, yeah. I haven't had much from since October, but yeah, absolutely. He's had. See, the thing with him is with the serreta and with the kind of, with that training that he was in, I'm sure lots of it was good, but some of it was pretty intensely difficult for him. And as a result of that, like I said, he would get fearful, and he would only, this is not a fear-based horse really. He's more of an aggressive, dominant kind of horse. So he would quickly go into attack mode. And there's been a couple times where, I've had nightmares about it, with him just, in his kind of, listen, get you kind of feeling, and where he's running to me, and and he's running back to me, and he's running to me, and I think, hey, he's coming, and then I go, wait a minute, he's coming to get me. I'm going, no, you're not, buddy. You're not coming to get me at all. You can back up now for a little while, or whatever I ask of him. But yeah, he definitely had that, and that's been taking literally a couple of years to just kind of rub that out and hang out with him and build a trust, but also get that respect at the same time. And dealing with a stallion of any kind, doesn't matter whether they've had any type of treatment. All it does is it takes one kind of sniff through the air from a mare of the neighbors, and all of a sudden, if they think that you're contesting them for that mare, it wouldn't matter what the treatment was previous. They might think, hey, you know what? You're not going to get that. I am. And then the fight is on. So there's been those struggles too. But in October, I was at this event. He's standing there, and we're standing in the line waiting to go out to do our show, and several horses walked right past underneath his nose. And 2 years before that, I wouldn't even have thought to have him in public anywhere with other horses there without him in a confined pen, just because they had to have everything, including the Soretta, to try to keep him there. So he's made a lot of changes, and we're starting to really build up a partnership. But it has been quite a long road.
If I'm understanding you correctly, for most people, a stud isn't something to be messing around with.
That's exactly right. It is not your recreational endeavor, and the big thing is there's so much more going on with a stallion than there is with a gelding or a mare. That's under the surface that you don't see, and everything could be going fine. And like I said, some other force from outside comes into that horse's mind, and he thinks now it's a contest. And in nature, the stallion, their willingness to fight, their willingness to dominate, their willingness to do all of those things, even to death or to injury or death, to get their band of mares is so far beyond what geldings have and what mares have. And it's extremely dangerous to be interacting with a stallion in those ways on a recreational level.
Yeah, they don't make a very good recreational horse, although some of them are a lot of fun to ride. We have a couple of studs around that are really good to ride, but you have to watch them all the time, don't you?
You do. You do. You really have to get your horsemanship skills up and be very aware. Absolutely.
Do you use a round pen much when you're starting your horses?
I do a bit. I don't do it as much as you might think. I use long lead ropes, longer leads, 20, 30-foot leads, and that's kind of the edge of the round pen for me. The reason I do that is because, if you're on the back and you pick up on the lead rope, whether that's picking up on the bit or if you're riding in the hackamore or the halter, and you pick up on that, they've got to respond away from the touch of that lead. And when you are in a round pen, you're at liberty. They're responding to the edge of the fence, the edge of the round pen. So they're not responding to the touch of the lead. So there's a bigger transfer or a bigger jump that has to be made when you get on the back if you've done a lot in the round pen, where if I just use a long rope and, the rope is, say it's, 25, 30 foot long, that becomes the edge of my round pen. And I'm moving horse in circles. I'm still getting him to connect or draw to me, still getting him to move. But every time I ask for a transition, every time he goes out and hits the end of the rope, to the edge of that line, it's not up against a fence, it's up against the rope. And then that touch off his nose gets that rope to connect to those feet. And ultimately, when I get on his back, I need that touch off that nose when I'm on his back to connect to those feet. So that's why I don't use it a lot in starting those young horses. With Max and Stitch, the young guys I just started, I might have used it for 20 minutes through the whole process. More for them just to kind of run around and have a little fun.
Sometimes there's some controversy about the one rein stop as a safety measure. What do you try to get into your horses so if they hit that panic mode or get fearful when you're on their back, how you can get them shut down? What do you do to take care of that situation?
It's a good question, Howard. One of the things about the one rein stop is that if people don't practice where they get the horses, when you pick up on a rein, that it connects to the feet. A horse can bend their head, as we all know, right around to your knee and still continue running at a gallop. Not only that, is if their head comes around too much, too quick, and you just kind of jerk them around, they can fall down. There's all of those kinds of things, and I think that's probably the controversy that you're talking about. One of the things that I do is I really teach them on the ground that when I pick up on that rein, it was interesting because I'll go back to Ronnie Willis for a sec here, but he used to say, son, I never put a halter on a horse's head. And I went, what do you mean, Ronnie? He says, I put that halter right on those feet. And when you're dealing with the horse on the ground, as you pick up a rein and you watch your head and neck bend, I want to see a foot move and continually connect that rope to their feet, so that when I do, and I'll definitely do a one rein stop and two rein stop and one rein stop with bend and a one rein stop keeping the horse straight and various things like that. I'll definitely do all that, but I really want to make sure that in my practice on the ground and in those first few rides, that when I pick up on that rein, it means something to those feet. It doesn't mean just bend your head around and continue going where you were going. I want to see the feet stop or move over. And the other big thing is that I want to be able to take one rein, yield the hindquarters around with that hindquarter disengagement. I want to be able to have that inside leg, that if it's a right rein, I'll take the right inside leg, and I want to be able to step that up in front of the left leg, bending that horse through the ribs and having those hindquarters cross over like that. And I did a lot of that with both those young horses before I even got on. Even in a half mount, I asked them to move their hindquarters around like that. And, the times where they do get jumpy or they take that spook or jump, you pick up on that rein and yield those hindquarters around and then redirect them and head off again. That's where I'll use it the most. And the one rein is used at that point because you're allowing the other side to go long, in the long side of the bend, and the inside is now, taking that hindquarters up underneath the other foot, and you then can get them off going on to something else.
Is there a tendency sometimes, in your view, for folks to overflex their horses?
Yeah, and there is a lot of times where people overbend or overflex a horse. And one of the things is, one of the reasons is because they haven't connected that rein to the feet. And, a lot of times where if we're riding along and we're thinking that we're trying to get the horse on the vertical or flex at the pole, that's important to have that. But at the same time, we need to be able to have that come through his body, to lift his shoulders, to bring his bum down, to lift his back, to bend his ribs. Those are those things that we're asking for when we pick up on a rein. Then the flexion or the bend through the horse laterally will come as a softening happens through the big parts that matter. See, whenever I'm picking up on a rein early on, I'm thinking about, do I have the big parts, the gristly parts, the parts that matter, working and suppling and moving? That means that's the shoulders, the rib cage, and the hindquarters. And the rib cage only does what it does as a result of how well you can articulate or move the shoulders and the hindquarters. So the flexion seems to work itself out after those three big parts are softened and very supplely yielding and in good communication.
Jonathan, time for our last break of today's program, but you folks stay tuned. We're going to be back with more in a moment. You're listening to the Horseman's Corner. Welcome back to the Horseman's Corner. We're on the last part of today's program. Gosh, this has been an interesting interview with Jonathon Field. Jonathan, what's some of the biggest mistakes you see people making when they're dealing with their horses?
The number one mistake is not understanding from the horse's point of view why the horse is doing what they're doing. And I'm the same. This is what interested me in this so much is when people started, Dr. Miller, when he started to talk about, when I started to hear him talk about psychology of horses and how they think and how they respond to pressure and what's naturally, the things that are, for example, like little things like, a horse has two sides of their brain and they have very little what they call a corpus callosum, and that's a covering that goes from one side to the other, that we have quite a thick one. That means that it sends information from side to side. And it doesn't make us completely ambidextrous, but it sends much more information. That's why when you take a horse down a trail and they see something on their left and they come back down the trail the other way and they act as if they didn't see it, it's because very little information from one side of knowledge is, and we've all had that. You can mount, or a horse can be really tame on one side and not tame on the other, or really wild or difficult to mount, or doesn't want to be saddled there, doesn't want to be led there, and those kinds of things. That's not the horse's fault. That's just their makeup, their physical makeup. He can't help it. If you're going to train one horse, you need to train both sides of one horse. So it's like training two. So when I see people get frustrated with horses because of these types of things, or how their eyesight works, or the three lenses in their eyes that are fixed, and how they have to move their head up and down to change that focus, not like a lens that we have that moves. These are just physical things, let alone the mental things, and how they regard the herd, and how they regard pressure, and what they do instantly when they feel pressure in the beginning. This is always sad to me when people blame the horse for being a horse, and they get frustrated. They've gone to go catch it, they've bought him, and they want to treat him like a motorbike. I think it's our responsibility to learn more about who they are, and learn about who they are physically, who they are from the point of view of their social life, and how they interact with their herd, and all of that all matters, and it doesn't matter. That's why, like when you mention horsemanship really doesn't matter English or Western, that's exactly right, because we're all dealing with the horse.
Well, it's kind of an interesting, we had an interesting situation. Guy that trains out of the barn that I have had a horse come in that was one side he was really fearful, which kind of tended to indicate that maybe what had happened to him, all the things that were bad had happened on one side. The other side, he was a lot softer. Yeah. And that's they can actually harbor fear on one side, where they completely like and trust you on the other side. I had a 22-year-old horse with this guy that came into a clinic, and this 22-year-old horse had been packed and ridden all over the country and done literally everything with, and he'd always been mounted on his left side. And I was teaching part of the clinic, and I said, for these reasons, we want to mount and dismount and, do things on both sides because of this whole idea about, teaching our horse on both sides, like I've explained. And, you never know out in the mountains, you got to dismount on one side or the other. Anyways, I went to mount this old horse on his right side, and I put my foot in the stirrup. And luckily I did all the, safety procedures. I had the rein short, and I had the technique of bring the head to me and the hindquarters away. And the moment I started to step up, that horse dove his head down, reacted as if he wanted to kick my head off. He's like, "What are you doing over there?" He acted as if a grizzly bear was going to get him. He had never been mounted on that side. And as a result of that, he acted as if it was a cougar. It was a grizzly coming to get him. And I, pulled his head around and disengaged his hind and, went beside him. I said, "It's me still, buddy." And I, over the course of about 10 minutes, I went up and down several times. And then he's like, "Oh, okay, I get it. You can mount on my left, you can mount on my right. It's still you. It's still the same." Howard, if I met you on my left side at dinner, and I spent the evening, we we're talking and, or having a beer and relaxing, whatever we're doing, and if you went to the bathroom and came back and sat down on my right side, I'd still like you. I'd still know you. There's a difference in the horse between a horse and a person, and that old boy had never been mounted on his right side, and as a result acted so, way over the top. So if we notice those things, those imbalances, even if it's just mounting and dismounting, those imbalances transfer to everything, whether we pick up one lead or the other, how softly they'll bend and balance on one side or the other, how well they change directions. All of these things, kind of have a domino effect, so to speak, that means something as we go further down the road with the horse. Well, and from a practical standpoint, if he's fearful when anything happens on the right side, if you've done everything on the left, doesn't mean that you're always, if you fall off or you get in trouble, it doesn't mean you're always going to go off on the left side, and you could have a real wreck, I'd assume, if you go off on the right if he's not used to it.
That's exactly right, and that's why we discussed in the clinic before I mounted him. I said, these are the reasons why we want to do it on this side, especially the fact that he's scared. We're not trying to scare him, but we're also trying to prepare him here. And if your saddle slipped off to the right, and now imagine your saddle hanging half off, or you hanging half off, or it'd have been a terrible wreck. And those situations happen in real life, for sure.
If I'm understanding you correctly, the way you work with the horse is not so sure, you could, I suppose, call it desensitizing, but it sounds more like you're just trying to gain their trust more than just desensitize. Would that be a correct assessment?
Absolutely. I mean, it can't just be about desensitization, because if you do, then, you've got a dull horse. You've got to be able to do both. I mean, if you look at the model of horses in a herd, they're not only desensitized and friends, but they'll also have a great deal of respect and run when the other ones run, turn when the other ones turn, stop when the other ones stop. They have this ability to get into sync to each other, like a flock of birds, like a school of fish. So that's a sensitivity as well as a desensitization that's happened between them, and a friendship or a partnership that's established between horses. And that's really what I'm looking for with my horses. I need them desensitized to things, horse trailers, to, the pounding of hammers on the feet for nails and, or rasping or whatever, all the different things, blankets and saddles. We need them desensitized to those things. But at the same time, we need them really sensitive. And the way that horses can tell the difference, and the way that I teach people to understand, is we communicate that difference through our intent. It's through our body language. So we got to be clear about our intention with whether we're on the ground or on the back. And that body language communicates to the horse a very clear picture of what we want to ask of the horse. So if we don't have the correct body language, we don't have the correct intent in our body and in our mind, then that horse will read that, and we might be getting exactly what we're sending to the horse, but not what we want from the horse. So we start with a whole kind of process of understanding how and why that works so well. And it's just remarkable to see the change in people and horses when people start to understand what they're saying with their body and how much that means to their horse.
Well, and it's important, one would think, to get that trust, because it's impossible to desensitize the horse to every situation that you're going to run into.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Ultimately, that's right, Howard. They've got to trust you at the root of it, because it's not about desensitizing to every object. It's about just, hey, I'm here, you're here, and trust my judgment that where I put you is safe. And that's something that we talk about a lot, for sure.
Do sometimes people get the idea that what you're doing with a horse is a cookie cutter approach? It isn't, is it?
No, it can't be, because every horse is so different, and every situation with every student is so different. And there are some things that are so for sure about horses, that we know of horses, that we know about just 500 years of horsemanship with regard to bend of balance, flexion, and these kinds of things. These are they've been kind of sorted out and flushed out. So those are key to understand. But because the nature of every horse is so different, and what we're asking of them and how they respond, we've got to be flexible in how we approach and understand that, what one might be good for one horse, one person, not good for the next. And it can't be a cookie cutter.
No, and I think sometimes, and you mentioned sometimes people think of the horse like a motorbike. I always thought it was more like they thought it was an ATV or a jet ski, but whatever. That's not it at all, is it?
No, I had a guy one time in a clinic, and I felt very good about this for his horse. He came to the clinic, and I did the whole talk around, the understanding of how horses work in their mind, and how it really is about this trust and partnership, and how that's the fun part of this journey. That's why. I mentioned George several times, but that's why George, at the point where he is in his life, he's still passionate to learn. There's still stuff to do with the horse. And he said, this gentleman in the clinic said to me, he said, really, there's that much? There's all that going on? He goes, the reason I got a horse was because I just wanted to go hunting. I just wanted to go in the bush. I didn't want to have to, have it have an opinion. I didn't want to have it think. I didn't want to have to gain a partnership. I didn't want to have to, and I said, my friend, you might want to think about a quad. This is not, you're talking about a live animal here. He's going to have opinions. He's going to have, and I seen him about several months later. He says, thank you for that. He goes, I'd have been frustrated with my horse the rest of my life. I went and got a quad. I found my horse a great home, and I thought, what, that's terrific for that horse, because you imagine being with somebody that expected you to be a machine when you're a horse, and he wasn't willing to put that time in, where everybody else was. I mean, I've only ever ran into one guy like that said, he wasn't really into it. Most time they're flushed out long before they ever see me. But, that's the fun part of the journey for me. That's why, we have quads and we have motorbikes and all these different things that we can go out and pick out on the ranch. And I run to the horse. I'll pick the horse every time, just because I want that. I want that dynamic, that relationship, and that idea that there's, communication happening. And it's such an amazing communication that happens between a horse and a person when we can really get it.
Well, about time to close this program out, but I'll ask you one final question. What would you like to mention to folks that I've been bright enough to ask you about?
Well, I think you've done a great job, Howard. I think you've hit it all on the head. I just appreciate your giving me a call, and thanks so much for having me on the program. And I just I'll have people, hopefully they come out to the Horse Expo, the Rocky Mountain Horse Expo out there, and we'll have a good weekend. I'm really looking forward to spending the time, and if they have horses that they want to bring, and they can contact the expo and hopefully get in the clinic with me and spend the weekend.
Yeah, and what do they have to do to get into that clinic that's the day before the expo actually starts, the 6-hour session you're having?
Yeah, they can contact the Horse Expo about that. They're putting that together, and they're going to have an application form there, and then people can come out and spectate it too. So it's going to be a good theory session in the morning, just about an hour introduction and kind of what we're going to do. And then because we have the 6 hours, we're going to lay out a really good clinic for everybody that they can take a ton of stuff home. Because when you're in the expo itself, it's only about an hour and 15 or an hour and a half each time, so you don't get quite that length of kind of seeing the whole thing come around. So that first day is going to be a fun one.
Hey, give us your website one more time so people can go visit and learn a little more about Jonathon Field.
Yeah, you bet. It's www.jonathanfield.net.
Jonathon Field, an outstanding horseman and clinician. He's right now at the Equine Affair out in California, but going to be at the Rocky Mountain Horse Expo March 11th through the 13th. Going to be some interesting things that he goes over, and that day before the expo is going to be very interesting when he has the 6-hour session. Well, thanks for joining us for today's edition of the Horseman's Corner. I'm Howard Hale, host of the program. Always great to have you folks along with us on the show. Since we're running out of time, I'll say goodbye. May God bless. See you next week. Same time, same place.